this session is a mouthful, right? I was trying to work out when Sarah said, well, what would I like to talk about? And I went, okay, we could do various topics. I went, let's talk about MCTs because I have people contacting me about it. I'll talk about the why in a minute or so. So I thought, let's talk about this. And I thought how to try and do a concise title. I thought MCT, the what, the why, the when, probably didn't flow. So I decided a bit of a mouthful for it because it actually spelled it out. So this, if my clicker works. So this is me. My moniker is the CRM Ninja. I blog, I tweet or X or whatever it's called today for it. I do ride a motorbike, a ninja motorbike. One of the reasons I'm called the CRM Ninja. For people who know me, and there are definitely some people on the call who know me. No, I'm not going to look at anybody specific. One or two of them may have happened to be WhatsApping me earlier saying, can't wait for your session. I do a lot of stuff for badges. If you've got swag, I go to conferences just to get swag, right? I went to the Excel in London yesterday. I popped in there for an exit. Admittedly, the exhibition was a total write-off and absolutely crap. Yes, I know I'm being recorded and this will be on YouTube, but I was expecting to get swag but over the years it's got less and less. I only managed to get a police cup this year. But I do a lot to get these sort of badges. And the important ones for today are really the ones on the right, which is I'm a Microsoft certified trainer. I've been a Microsoft certified trainer since early 2020, just after the pandemic started and first lockdown. And I'm a MCT regional lead. I'm one of about 100 globally. I think it's about 100 or so globally for them, which is sort of the representatives between the MCT program and MCTs. So I'll talk a bit more about this later, but essentially we can take stuff when they're looking at changing the MCT program, they get us together and they go out and they ask us for our input on how we're going to do stuff. As you see, I'm an MVP as well and variety. I do a lot of stuff for badges. I've got a great conference jacket. Anyway, this is officially what Microsoft Learn says about MCTs. The premier technical and instructional experts in Microsoft technology. Yeah. Again, knowing that this is being recorded and people may watch this later, I've got to be slightly careful in what I say. But essentially, MCTs are trainers. You don't become an MCT for fun. I know there's a badge for it, but we'll talk about the criteria, and especially the criteria has been tightened up over the last year or so. But they are trainers. People who go for certifications and other things generally will go through training, which is why it's called a Microsoft Certified Trainer. I'll talk about what's needed for it. Are all MCTs the premier technical and instructional experts? No, they're not. There is a wide range of capability for MCTs for it. So just because you have somebody who is an MCT, if you're going on a course and you see somebody's presenting one, doesn't necessarily mean that they are the best at what they do. So I always say if people are doing it, and especially if you're booking an MCT for a private course, organizations do this, MCTs can come train for organizations and do bespoke courses, as well as Microsoft official courses. Just make sure you get somebody who you know what they're talking about. And on the flip side, your aspiration, if you're looking to be an MCT, is really to know what you're talking about. But we'll talk about why this is. So why would you like to become an MCT? Well, as I said, it's not just about the badge. There are requirements around doing it, but you want to essentially do training. You want to train others. And this is a more formal sort of training. You can train informally. Lots of people train informally. Generally, people who become MCTs already have some sort of training. They're already, doing mentoring. They're training people, regardless of what area it is. It does not need to be in Microsoft. It does not need to be in BizApps, but they decide they want to be, come what. And there are several options available. They can become a full-time trainer. So your day job is training. There are various people out there. BizApps community, if you haven't heard of Julian Sharp, you probably should, because he is like the OG of trainers, right? He was the one who first got me interested in certifications. He was the one who got me interested in becoming an MCT. He was the one who got me interested in becoming a regional lead. You get the thing, right? I have what I call the rule of Julian, and I can say this publicly because I've said this to Julian and I've said this to lots of others, which is most people in the world who go through certifications have either been trained directly by Julian or been trained by somebody that Julian has trained as a trainer. So it's what I call the rule. Julian is like one step away or two steps away. So become a full-time trainer, and that's your day job. We'll talk about how you can do that. You become a part-time trainer. You could do your day job and train on the side. I am a part-time trainer. I am engaged by Microsoft for specific training for some of the capabilities that they do, and I do this outside of my day job. Now, how does this work in terms of employment? Well, there are various options. You can be an independent contractor, so you can be contracted to do a job. I have that. Microsoft contracts with me to be able to do training for it. You can work for one of the training service providers or TSPs. So there are training providers. I think Firebrand here in the UK is one of them. There are other ones as well, and there are international ones which provide training. They have a pool of trainers. Some of them are full-time for them, some of them are part-time, some of them are contractor, and you go and you work for it. But again, this isn't you just getting a getting the badge and sitting back for it. You actually have to do something for it. And as I said, the process has been locked down. So if you're not comfortable with training, don't become an MCT. So that's tip number one before we even get to the tips page, which is at the end of the deck. If you do want to become training, you can look at it. Now, you don't have to become an MCT to train, but there are various benefits that are available to you. So if you become an MCT, everybody always asks about benefits. The first one is you get a discount on any exams you're going to take. No, you don't get them for free. You still have to sit the exams. That's very important. You also get an Azure monthly subscription. Now, this is a bit similar to the M365 developer plan in terms of resources. I can't remember how much it is a month. It's not a massive amount, but it enables you to be able to get access, to be able to get hands-on, right? One of the really important things about training, it's not about theory, but it's about being able to be hands-on. So you get an Azure subscription, you can go, you can run stuff, you can access, you can spin up, spin down. In the BizApps area, it's a bit less complicated because you can, of course, just use the developer plan. But if you wanted to, say, use an Azure Logic app or, Azure registrations, you've got this available to you. You get access to what we call the MOOCs, the Microsoft Official Courseware. Now, just because you have access to them doesn't mean you can just use them at free will. Because we log in, it's a secured site. MCT's all get access. It's called the MCT Lounge. It's a great name for a forum. But part of that forum is the material available. So if you've ever been part of a certification and it goes through and you see all those certification slides, that is the MOOC. That's usually Microsoft Official Courseware. But you cannot use those to run your own bespoke course. So you can't say, hey, I'm an MCT, I want to train on the PL200, I'm going to download it, I'm going to just advertise my course and get people to pay me however much I think I could get off them for it and do that. If you are working for a training provider, they have a license to be able to use these. So if you're working for a training provider, then you can use these when you're doing the training. If you're doing as an independent, you have to pay a fee to be able to train using the official material. Now, you can, of course, go ahead if you decide to do your own bespoke course. You can be inspired by the official courseware and go and create your own content. But you cannot use your own content. You cannot use the Microsoft official content publicly. You cannot as well record tutorials and training information on YouTube or other platforms, which may be free or may be paid for, because that's in breach of the agreement that you have with Microsoft. Microsoft aggressively patrols things like YouTube and appreciates MCTs who report these in, and MCTs can get it removed and be blacklisted from the program. And you get access to trainer guides. This gives you an overview of how to train, how long a course is, what you can discuss, discussion points and things like that during it. And finally, you get access to labs. Now, a lot of stuff, especially with the applied skills, is now getting much more towards it. But as part of official courses, there are labs. People get hands-on, follow lists of instructions, and you get access to these as part of a trainer. They're virtual labs. This is really important because stuff changes. It's very important to be able to know what you're training on, right? And to be able to be proficient in it. But we'll talk about that a little later. If anybody has any questions, by the way, just raise your hand and then you can come off mute rather than doing the question. So how do you become an MCT? If you say, you know something, I've been training people, I've read Microsoft Learn, I help people with stuff. Again, does not need to be BizApps, does not need to be Microsoft, right? But you want to become a trainer. So it's a multi-stage process. The first thing you need to do is go onto the MCT webpage and accept the MCT program agreement. You need to acknowledge and adhere to these terms when you go ahead and submit your application. That's a bit like the EULA, the licensing, right? You know, when you spin up new software, you just click yes to it. But it's important to note things like you cannot use the Microsoft official courseware in your own remit for it. And then what you need to have is you need to have one or more qualifying credentials against your Microsoft Learn user profile. This needs to be an associate or expert level. Fundamentals do not count for it. So you need to hold, for instance, the PL200 or the MB210 or the MB230. I know there's a new exam coming out. I'm not going to talk about the way that the exams are changing at the moment. This is not about certification specifically. This is more about training for it. You need to ensure you've got at least one of them and pass it. At least only one qualifying certification is required to enroll or renew membership. Yes, I said renew. You don't get this forever. You have to renew on an annual basis. We'll talk about that a bit later for it. And when you say you're an MCT, you don't say, I'm an MCT for the PL200. You just go, I'm a Microsoft certified trainer. But in order to officially train a course, you need to hold the certification for which you are training. So for instance, I do not hold the PL300. I cannot train the PL300. Now, when you are engaging with training houses, some of them are better at checking this than others, which is why, as I said, if you're going on a training course, you know the trainer is, just ensure that you know ideally who the trainer is, because that way you can ensure that they know what they're actually talking about for it. And then, and this is where the program changed slightly, you go through what we call a proof of instructional skills. Now, it used to be that you could do this, and there was some other options as well. There were various options to prove that you could train. In the pandemic, Microsoft loosened several of the qualifications to be able to become an MCT, and they saw things shoot up through the roof. There were a lot more people who decided to become an MCT who didn't actually do any training for it. And part of the thing that Microsoft has done is to lock this down to ensure that they want to ensure the quality of trainers. So they want to ensure you can actually go into a classroom environment, however that classroom is structured, and be able to train. So now what you go through is you go through an instructional skills certificate provider. So this isn't Microsoft itself. These are third parties. There is a list available on the MCT website. Microsoft has approved various ones, and you need to go through a course with them. It's normally between a 2 to a 4-day course, and yes, they charge for it. But the aim of this is that it's not aimed at a specific Microsoft certification, but it's aimed at how do you engage in a classroom? How do you explain things? How do you present? It's to ensure essentially you can become a teacher in a classroom. And once they're happy that you do that, you pass the course, you then get a certificate from it. And the organization will submit the verification of your training completion into the MCT program. So they send it through. You don't submit the certificate. You get a lovely little digital certificate or email confirming you've completed it. And they then send that into Microsoft. They're authorized. They've got the necessary channels to send it in. So Microsoft knows that AN Other has been through a course by provider ABC and has passed it. That passes is not just going through the course, it's passing the course. And no, there is no automatic right to pass. If the trainers who are running the course do not feel that you are up to the standard, they will very politely and respectfully but fail you. They will not allow you to pass. And then you actually go through the application for being an MCT. So you've already started this off because you need to agree to the program. Then you go away and you book your instruction of skills, assuming you've got a certification already. If not, you take your certification. You cannot skip any steps in this. You do need to go through this in order. When you complete the online application, you choose the Microsoft approved organization that ran your instructor course. You can probably hear behind the scenes that a lot of this is manual still, right? Because you're selecting the organization. Microsoft then go and double check that they've actually sent something through about you. There are plans to make this much more automated. The MCT program is undergoing a massive review at the moment in terms of systems being used internally within Microsoft and automations and integrations with partners. And then you go through the application, and should everything tick that you've accepted the program agreement, you have at least one qualifying credential, one qualifying certification, and these will change over time. Microsoft releases a list, they keep it up to date. You've been through the instructional skills, you've successfully managed to complete your details and click submit into the application. You will then get an email at some point afterwards. When I did it, it took about 5 days to say, congratulations, you are now a Microsoft certified trader. You think, great. What do you do next? Well, if we skip a bit to what you do next, there's something as well that you need to keep in mind, which is, as I said, when you get an MCT, get to be an MCT, you get it for a year. And like your certification, it's on the year you get it, it's on the date you get awarded. You have renewals. You need to renew every year. Now, also important to note, and this is one of the changes they made in the pandemic, there used to be a cost for it. It used to cost approximately $1,000 to register as an MCT and renew on an annual basis as an MCT. In the grand scheme of things, I know that can seem a lot, but we'll come to rates and training and such, but you can make that back quite easily with training for it. At the moment, it is free. Microsoft took off the payment qualification during the pandemic. It is still off. However, Microsoft may decide to bring it back. Don't know anything more than that. I don't know if they're bringing it back, when they're bringing it back, how much they may charge at that point. Just Microsoft has said it's off for the moment. Let's put it that way, which in Microsoft land means probably somebody, when they realize what they could make from it, will try and bring it back incredibly. For the renewal, we have a lovely tool which we call MTM, Metrics That Matter. For every class that is carried out, you or the training provider that you are going through provide feedback surveys to the people who have come, to your trainees, the people who have come on the course, who fill it in. It's feedback. It's great. It's very important, right? Anybody who speaks at a community event knows the importance of feedback and being rated on what you do and being able to get better. But you need to achieve a minimum score. And that's not a low score. It's scored out of 5. I think the passing score is, 4.1 or 4.2. If you dip below that as a score, you are not showing, well, officially the thing is you are not showing the level of quality that Microsoft is looking for. So you can go have conversations with people to see what you can do to up it. This is why Microsoft is trying to ensure not everybody just becomes an MCT, and with ratings of 1 out of 5, there is quality, because these are certifications. This is official training on behalf of Microsoft for it. So everything needs to go into Metrics That Matter, into the MTM tool, and then when you renew, it goes away and it queries MTM if the integration is working on that day. And then it says, okay, you're good to go. And if you're not good to go, it will tell you you're not good to go. But you need to do this on an annual basis. You can renew from, 3 months before your renewal date. So if you've already got it in there, it will go. It doesn't bring your renewal date earlier. It just says, right, you're renewed. And then your new year of being an MCT will go from the next year. Just going to pause if there are any questions at the moment. Okay. Either everybody is thinking, I really don't want to be a teacher. Everybody's thinking, yay, let's sign up. Incidentally, as an aside, it's amazing how many of my class at school who said they would never teach anything actually went into in one way or another, the teaching profession. It always amazes me. Okay, so you've gone through, you've become an MCT. Great. What are your opportunities that are available to you? So the first one is through TSPs, training service providers. These are official training houses. Firebrand, as I mentioned earlier, is one of the ones in the UK. For it, you can engage with them. You engage with other ones. I don't directly engage with Firebrand. I engage with Microsoft, usually directly. I've managed to get to that point. But there are multinational. There are global ones for it. And part of being known and having a presence for stuff, your quality of work, whether you decide to blog about it or present about it, or you've done a lot of training already, is that training service providers may seek you out, or other MCTs will recommend you. But you can then go and you run these courses. Now, of course, you don't run a course which you are not familiar with, which you do not have the certification for. As I said, you need to do that. Some TSPs are better checking on that than others. You also need to ensure that you are not just reading words off a screen. This is, again, very important. It's about the quality of training. Certification training can take place in a variety of different ways. You can be running a class in person. You can be running a virtual event, something like this. You can be running a hybrid event, whereby either you could be presenting with virtual and people in person in a room, or you could be in a room with people and others connecting in virtually. I always say to people, make sure you're comfortable. These are three very different formats, especially if you're doing virtually. And depending on the training provider, you can have a large number of students. I presented with 60 students on a call, and none of them are on video at all. That's fine. I have no problem. I can be the only one on video. I'm very used to that. But trying to gain interactions with them and feedback, whether they come off mute, whether they put something into the chat, can be very, very difficult. Can also be culture based, especially if you're training in the international scene for it. You can also be engaged. I didn't put this up. Did I put this up? Let's see. Okay, fine. The next one. Right. Microsoft Cloud Week. So Microsoft Cloud Week, they run them several times a year. There are certification tracks, again, usually through TSPs, but Microsoft goes and arranges these. So you're working alongside the Microsoft WWL team, the Worldwide Learning Team. And again, you are a trainer. You have people who turn up. You generally have no idea who they are at all for it. VILTs, Virtual Instructor-Led Training. Now, this is not the virtual certification training that I've done at the top, which is live. VILTs in Microsoft speak is when you sign up for something and it's pre-recorded. You can be engaged by training providers, by TSPs, to record certification training material. It's all authorized, it's all fine to do. It's cheaper for them because they pay you to do one recording and then they play the recording multiple times, however they're handling and doing it. I'm just being open about this. But essentially you are doing recording for it. They provide the material, you do the recording, and then it is played back. This can be quite amusing at times. Why do I say this can be amusing at times? Several years ago, I had some colleagues who had signed up for a specific certification training. It was a Monday. I knew that they had signed up for it. It was a Monday morning. I was on a client call, and suddenly my team starts lighting up with, "Ewa, you're supposed to be on a client call. Why are you presenting a training session for Microsoft?" And I go, "I'm on the client call." They go, "No, you're presenting." Turned out one of the certifications I had been contracted to record was actually the one that they had signed up for. I had to explain to my manager a bit about that. It wasn't live, it was out of hours, and the rest of that. That was interesting. Anyway, but you can do this. There are, again, quite a few of these. This is much more the norm now rather than live training, just because it's easier across multiple time zones for global training providers to be able to do it. They don't need to have so many live people that's there. Although for VILTs as an MCT, you could be, as well, you could handle chat support. So be a moderator, be able to provide a what they call SME, subject matter expert, support for people with questions. The one thing I realized I didn't put on this slide, again, because this is not perfect, you can be engaged as an MCT to provide a private course. So as an organization, you can engage, organizations do engage with MCTs to do bespoke certification tracks for them. And that's fine. They can subscribe to the official Microsoft courseware. If they don't want to do that, then they can ask for a bespoke course to be created for them. This is something else that they can do. I know several MCTs who mostly do that. But the last thing as an MCT, which doesn't jump out at people initially, and this should not be the reason for becoming an MCT, I'm going to stress here, certification materials. If you are an MCT and you are known as a good MCT in that space, you can be reached out to by the Microsoft teams to work on the certifications, whether that's creating exam items, creating some of the new renewal items. Now the renewals, we do renewals rather than exams, reviewing or giving information into blueprinting moving forward. So I was just on a review panel, for instance, for one of these certifications, in which we were looking at items that actually weren't really around now at all, but because certifications draw up their static point in time, they were still on the certification. So the next wave, when the certification is updated and the update is released publicly, several items will no longer be there. They are pruned over time, normally 2 to 3 times a year, depending on the certification and the feedback. But again, this is not why you should become an MCT. You don't have to become an MCT to be involved in this. Subject matter experts who are known to Microsoft and to MCTs are involved in these as well. But that's just a little bonus. It's interesting to be able to be actually a part of the development of the exams that people are sitting. We cannot talk about which exams or what we've done for the exam. There is a major NDA, which is why I'm being as high level as possible and as generic as possible for it. Okay, tips and tricks. First thing, be comfortable with what you're going to train. Now, I have a variety of certifications that I can train on. Some of them I'm more comfortable with than others. That's either because I have a very basic knowledge. I've passed a certification, but I have a basic knowledge in how the certification, for instance, has evolved over the time for it and what it's actually touching on. Or I don't have actual hands-on knowledge. I can only talk about theory. Talking about theory is good, but it's really about practice that drives it home. So be very comfortable about what certifications you want to train. If you're going full-time, that's fine. You will have training academies that will say do the PL200 on a weekly basis or fortnightly basis. Every 2 weeks, every 3 weeks, they'll do that. And you could do just the PL200. It can get stale after a time. You will potentially start dreaming the courseware. I have maybe done that once or twice. But just be aware of this and know your limits. If you don't feel that something is in your wheelhouse, be very clear about it. Qualify it out. As well as the format. If you're not comfortable in person, be very careful about taking on a training in person. Leaving aside the logistics of traveling to wherever the location is and the costs and I'm talking about if you're not comfortable, if you're very comfortable sitting behind a computer screen, right? I'm very comfortable sitting behind a computer screen. I actually met my wife through a very legitimate, I hasten to add, dating website. We used to Skype. Yes, it was back in those days when Skype was around. Skype is no longer around, of course, way before Microsoft Teams had ever been thought of. I'm very comfortable doing that. At that point in time, going out and dating, yeah, that was not particularly good. Trying to meet people in person. So if you're happy with that, but on the contrary, I know people who hate remote delivery. They hate virtual delivery. For them, it's all about being in person. So work on what your comfort zone is. Work on if you want to push yourself slightly outside your comfort zone. And if you're going to choose something lightweight, but just be clear about that. The worst thing is to put yourself in a training situation where you are not comfortable at all with the training scenario because you're not being able to see what the students are doing. The students aren't providing feedback, or every student is slamming you with feedback because it's a virtual one. So they've got 25 people in the room just for one person and everybody's got challenges and problems for it. Be comfortable. The second thing, be comfortable with your rates. Now, rates is something, right? It's finance, it's pay. People don't talk about publicly. I'm not going to say, here's a table of rates and what you should do. If you are close with an existing MCT, go and have a casual chat with them. We're not trying to price people out. There is more than enough of a market for people, and we can give you an indicator. But be comfortable in what you are doing. As well, understand about negotiations. Some training service provider, I'm not talking about now when you're going in as an individual and you're contracted into an organization who wants a bespoke training course, say, right? That's usually easy. You have a day rate or you have a rate for the course, and that's fine. If it's a bespoke course that you need to create the material for, work out how much time you're going to need to create the material for it and ensure that you charge appropriately for that. But there are some TSPs out there who are a race to the bottom, and they try and screw over, or they will screw over trainers for them. Now, they're generally known. If you talk to other established MCTs, they will be able to tell you quite quickly as to whether you should engage with them or whether you should run as far away as possible from them. I have the unfortunate displeasure of having two organizations continually contact me. Every time I block one of their email addresses, somebody creates a new email address about it. But the rates are abysmal. They are so low, it is not worth my time. Might be worth the time of somebody remote, say from India, where a much lower rate would actually be a very decent salary for them. But I live here in the UK, and I can tell you that there are some of them who the rates are really, really bad. So if go talk to another MCT, been around for a couple of years, we are generally approachable. Talk in the area as well that you're training. If you're training in BizApps, a good BizApp MCT will be a different rate to an M365 MCT. Part of that is supply and demand, part of that is niche experience and knowledge about it. But there is a range. I remember some years ago I was talking to an organization about it, said I couldn't, but I knew somebody else. I went to talk to somebody else and they charge a rate that was 3 times my rate because of their expertise. I'm like, great. One day, hopefully, I'll be able to get up to that level. Right. Not there yet, right? One day, hopefully. But important. But don't be afraid to negotiate around it. And be aware of contracts. Now, if you're working as an independent, you can create your own contract. As with any business engagement, you should have your own contract, your own terms and conditions, which you send out for signing to a customer. If you're engaging with organizations to run training, say, for employees, then that's fine for it. Make sure you cover things like sickness, cancellation, and other things like that. Very, very important. Because if suddenly they decide to cancel it and you don't have anything in your contract about cancellation charges, you're going to have a problem for it. Or if you're off sick, they may say, well, if you don't have anything to cover sickness, are you required to find another trainer for it? Can you push it off? Do you have to pay a penalty? Things like this are important. You may mutually sign contracts, so always read the small print and ensure you're covered. In terms of cancellation as well, just be aware you're not necessarily going to be able to pick up another training gig at short notice. So ensure that you have, say, a 50% or 75%. I like the way that airlines usually do it, or hotels. If you cancel a month before, you can get 100% refund. If you cancel 3 weeks before, 75, 50, and that. Just work out what you're comfortable with, and again, work out your budget. If you are doing it as an independent, you are of course a contractor, and therefore you're responsible for your own finances and all the rest of that. Whereas if you work directly and employed by one of these training academies, you are of course an employee. So it's a bit different. But if you are contracting in to a training academy, so you're contracting into a TSP, you're not employed by them, they will issue you with their contract. I have not come across any TSP that will accept my contract for the engagement. And this is really where it's vital to read the small print. To a point you have no idea. I have seen some horrific contracts. I've actually flagged one or two of them to Microsoft, and I say this is not the way do you want your TSP, because TSPs have direct engagement with Microsoft as well as a training provider. I say this is not the way at Microsoft that you want your TSPs to do so. One of them required me, to memory, if I was sick, if anything happened to me, so if I was hit by a bus or if I was sick, I had to spend the time and effort to get a replacement trainer. I had to pay the replacement trainer whatever their rate was, even if it was more important, and I had to pay a penalty fee for the inconvenience to the training academy. That was one of the clauses that was a problem. There were a lot of other ones. So read the fine print. If you're not familiar or you're not comfortable with reading fine print, go speak to an established MCT. We are quite familiar with how contracts work, and we can advise you on them. Sometimes they can be modified. Sometimes the TSP will turn around and say, that's it, take it or leave it, in which case, in my experience, it's better to leave it rather than take it. So be very familiar. I happen to, I don't read contracts for a living, I want to be very clear, but I have rented multiple properties. I've also been a landlord. I'm familiar with contracts and how they work and stuff for it. I have friends who rent properties and they come and say, can I review their rental contract, or what happens if the fridge has gone up the blink and who pays for it, right? This has prepared me greatly for being able to read, training contracts. Very important, especially in contracts, and I have seen this on occasion, whereby two sections contradict itself, so they cancel each other out. So you need to have a view. So again, if you're not comfortable with that, feel free. Sarah.
Hi, just from to dig deeper on that replacement. So if you were a consultant, like an outside IR35 contractor, for example, part of the IR35 assessment would be to find your own replacement if you wanted to be deemed outside. So is this different to acting as an independent consultant like a contractor? Does that make
So,
sense?
so I'm aware of IR35, and I'm speaking in a more general sense. I deal generally with organisations that are outside of the UK, not for UK training, because, as I said, I do it part-time and I do it outside of core work hours. So I can't speak to the IR35 one, but if a trainer is some training TSPs, if a trainer is sick, they will have other trainers that they will go to. They will handle the replacement because they have a pool available and they'll go out to it. I know because I've been asked to step in on occasion for some of them. But others will say, if you're sick, that's your responsibility to find somebody else.
Yeah, that's where I would guess that clause is coming from, if it's maybe UK based.
So the ones that I've had are not in UK based, where I've seen that be in there.
Yeah. Okay, cool. Thank you.
No problem. I said it before. If anybody else has any questions, just put your hand up for it. Okay, so yeah, contract, the paperwork, very important. Also ensure that you have your payment terms in place. Some of them are better than others. Some of them require 30 or 60 days post training. I've seen one contract that required it to have a minimum satisfaction score from the students, which I said wasn't fair because if the students decided they didn't like the instructor for whatever reason, they could, yeah, tip that unfairly for it. Review the course before you deliver it. Now, this may seem really simple, but this is also really important, right? And there's a reason for this. Courses are developed and they're static at the point in time. Especially when it comes to Power Platform and business applications, it's a cloud system, it's SaaS, software as a service. You get all the latest up-to-date stuff, which means things move around. I have had it whereby I've reviewed courses, I've seen it, I've trained 1 week, I'm training the next week, and the interface has changed. I've had it live within a session whereby we went for a morning break and the session and the interface has changed. Microsoft has done a release or something, a minor update, and something has changed. Something doesn't work. The lab instructions are incorrect. Screenshots, especially if they're looking to see the Swiffer lab instructions where they do it. Now, they can be updated. Everything is now really nicely hosted on GitHub. All the lab information is on GitHub as well. You can just search for them. You put the certification number in, you say GitHub and labs. You can find them so you can gain access to it even without being an MCT. That you don't gain access into the actual labs, it's just the instructions. But if you find problems and you're so minded, you want to show that you've got GitHub contributions, possibly, you can go ahead and submit changes into it and give that there are problems with it, and it will get reviewed and updated. It's slowly getting better. But even more importantly than this, be able to use your own experiences. This is why I say don't train something you're not experienced with. There are slides. There are notes on the slides. If you can read the text off it, I could say, right, here's a training course, so be comfortable with what you want to train in the format. Ensure you handle your rates. Think about negotiate. I can read this, right? You can read this. We can all read the text off. Even when I'm training students who English is not a first language or even a second language, they can read the screen. And the content is somewhat dry. Now, some are getting better for it, but overall, it can be somewhat dry. So take your own experience. When I'm talking about customer service and I'm training around customer service, for instance, I bring my experience in customer service, the type of organizations I've done work in for it, how I've enabled them, what the benefits are, what the challenges are. And especially true, this is true. This is one moment, sorry. Sorry, child's just come home from school. All the joys of little children. So things like the PL600 course, the solution Power Platform used to be Power Platform and Dynamics 365. Now it's just Power Platform because Dynamics 365 is obviously capability on the Power Platform, but it's the Solution Architect course. there's very little to actually show, because it's not about implementing and ticking a box here and flicking a toggle there and copying and pasting information. It's about how you approach architecture. There were a lot of discussions. And if you're not a solution architect, if you haven't run projects as a solution architect, it can be very, very difficult. So ensure that you are using your own experiences. And again, we go back to the bit at the top, be comfortable with it. If you're not comfortable holding a open roundtable about architecture because you've never run a project, you don't know how to do it, don't train the PL600 course or any one of the other ones for it. But also ensure to be able to adjust to students. Students can be tricky things, right? We'll remember when we were back in school, right? What we would do to wind up teachers. It's not as bad as that. Generally, they're adults, but they can ask the most ridiculous of questions. So ensure you're happy with it. Maybe you've got somebody able to support you to answer questions. If you're doing virtual experience, so you have somebody to answer Q&A and messages in there, or you do breaks and you have a message thing for it. The day is normally split up into about 6.5 hours of training per course, not per course, per day. So a one-day course, the fundamentals will be a 1 day. The the PL200 will be I think it's a 3 or a 4 day course. Can't remember if they changed it or not. So just ensure, you've got breaks, use the breaks, offer time for it if you feel comfortable, and just try and keep some time. But also there's one thing to keep in mind is there's the official course period, right? So the PL600, if it's 3 days or 4 days, check how long the provider is running it for. Some do accelerated courses. They're expecting you to cram 3 days into 2 days, or 4 days into 2.5 or 3 days. Again, ensure that you are comfortable with it, which is very important to do. Okay, and with that, if there are any questions, then we can open it up. Charles.
Thanks, EY. That was really interesting. I guess my question is around the financial side of things. So how does it compare to work, say, full-time as an MCT versus working full-time as a consultant or a developer?
So just like with any other skill, if you're a good MCT, you will be able to charge a decent rate and be able to make decent money. If you're a newer MCT, your rate will usually be lower to reflect on that. I recommend to people, if they're being an MCT, start being an MCT and then get a more experienced MCT to sit in on something you're doing, or try and engage with something that they're doing, whereby you could present part of it and sort of get the thumbs up or the constructive criticism from a more experienced MCT. I have been training for 1.5 years, and it was only after about 1.5 years, maybe 2 years, I managed to get an opportunity with Julian Sharp, who I mentioned earlier. I know him personally and through the Microsoft community. And I engaged on a training alongside him, and he gave me feedback afterwards that made me feel actually I was doing decently well for it. In terms of how much you can make as a contractor, how much you could make a year versus being a full-time employee, I would say, you obviously need to ballpark, things like, your pension, and any contract, but, your holiday time off, how much time a year you can use to train for, and so on and so forth. But I would say you should be looking, again, with a caveat that somewhat your stuff, you're just getting new into the MCT space, 40,000-50,000 a year without too much of a problem. And more experienced MCTs will be charging more and will be making more than that. That's in the BizApp space. Again, I'm focused more on the BizApp space for it. As an M365, the rates are lower. So if you're running M365 courses, it could be lower on that.
Cool, thank you.
But I know quite a few MCTs who I would say, in my reckoning, are into 6 figures a year. But that's really when you're getting to be top of your game.
Yeah, thanks, EY.
Pleasure. Daniel?
Hi, EY. So my question is around getting the classes and the students. Is it like Microsoft has some kind of list of MCTs split by country, by topic, whatever, and assisting with the organizing events and providing lists of students or whatever, or is it more like personal branding, being known in the community, promoting yourself as an entity and with the trainings that you're providing and just waiting for people to sign up?
So Microsoft doesn't provide lists of students and lists of MCTs. There is no website you can go on to show all the MCTs in your country or globally for it. There is a list for the MCT regional leads, as I said, with the liaison between sort of MCTs and the MCT program within Microsoft. And there is a list publicly of those and the contact details, and it shows that per country. If you are creating your own courseware, so you're not using the Microsoft official courseware, when you're running your own programs, you can set how long you want to run them for, how many students you may want to do the format, and you promote that yourself. So you go on social media, you promote it around and do that. If you are engaged by organizations who want to come, have you come in and they'll provide employees, so several MCTs specialize in that, then it's engaging with organizations that want to run certification courses, right? Some of the consultancies, various technical consultancies will want that. They bring in an MCT because it's cheaper for them to do that. And it's having that relationship and trying to get it. If you are working as a full-time employee for one of the TSPs, the TSP handles all of that for you. So they promote the course, they run, you are just the trainer who is assigned to teach the course. You don't have to go and get the students. And the same thing is true if you're contracting with an MCT as being an independent, so you're not a full-time employee. So for instance, I had one of the TSPs who I engage with through Microsoft reach out to me and say, look, we've got an opportunity for it. Would you be interested? Sorry, I'm just plugging in my headset. Would you be interested in it? And I said, yeah, I would be interested in it. And they went, great. They handle the sign up of students. They handle all of that sort of stuff for me. I'm not doing any of that at all. So that's essentially everything is done by the TSP. They're handling the promotion of it. They're getting the students in. They're providing the courseware and the access and everything else in virtual labs.
Yeah, I understand. My question was more around the options that you have as a fresh new starter MCT. I'm guessing that TSPs wouldn't line up to ask you for providing sessions if you're just off the bench, And what options would you have there?
So as a fresh MCT, if you're working so as a contractor or full-time employee.
Contractor.
So as a contractor, you could engage with other MCTs to be able to have them recommend you. There is especially I know within BizApps specifically, there is a good community within the BizApp MCT community for it, definitely within UK Europe. I'm a part of it. And, we put opportunities up and we recommend it. And again, we need to be comfortable that people know what they're doing to become a trader. Just because you've gone through, you've qualified as an MCT, doesn't mean we're going to suddenly just recommend shoving you in front of some particularly high profile clients. You need to know your stuff and we need to be comfortable in that level. But as I say, engaging with, other MCTs and seeing what you could do with them.
Okay.
There are also, when you get access to MCT Lounge, there are opportunities that are posted in there. Now, generally they are slammed by people from countries who are, the cost of living is much less than the UK to be open, and therefore their rates can be a lot lower. And usually things that are posted in that they're going for the lowest rate available. There are also Facebook groups and LinkedIn groups as well, whereby people post that they're looking for MCTs to deliver whatever program, whichever certification it is, and people can then contact. So I would say definitely, networking is really, really important if you're a new MCT and you are contracting in. Once you get recommended into a place, as long as you do well, generally they will keep you on. I said I started 4 years ago or so, and I get reached out to a couple of times a year for stuff.
Okay. I have one last question. Are MCTs only preparing people for certifications, or would you also be involved in training sessions for, I don't know, some Dynamics 365 sales presentations or some end user training, not necessarily for certifications?
So as an MCT, officially an MCT is one who is training for certifications because it's the Microsoft official courseware, which is around it. As an MCT, you can also run bespoke courses. You can say you're an MCT. You can, create your own training courses if you want to for it. Incidentally, you're an MCT. But you can also do that without being an MCT.
Okay.
If you wanted to do a training guide, a training course on Dynamics 365 sales, you could go and create that without being an MCT. And a lot of people do. There are YouTube tutorials and a variety of other stuff and things.
Yeah, but it sounds better when you're an MCT.
It does sound better, yes. There's a badge that goes with it.
Okay, thank you.
I had a question, EY. You mentioned that you have to get kind of star rated by students. When you pre-record a session, does every time that goes out, does that get rated?
If you're providing pre-recorded material, it doesn't. No. Whichever organization is hosting it will usually have some sort of feedback mechanism into how the session has gone. If you've got some really good relationship going on, you could potentially get some feedback loaded in for it, but officially it doesn't count. Officially, it's about live training. It's not about pre-recording and putting up somebody for people to access.
Okay, cool.
Because it's not just about you reading off the screen and doing it, it's also about you interacting with your audience, with your students, being able to support them.
Yeah, it's certainly the best way, isn't it, if you can be interactive. But yeah, just wondered. No, well, thanks, EY. That was really interesting. I didn't know a lot of that. It's the first session around MCT that I've been on or hosted. So yeah, it's opened my eyes to quite a lot of information there. Hopefully it has some familiar names there in the audience. So Charlie is excellent at presenting and teaching, so it wouldn't surprise me if he was going down this route at some point. But yeah, thanks very much, really useful. And
pleasure.
Yeah, we'll have you back soon.
No problem. Thank you so much for the opportunity. And if anybody has any follow-up questions they want to ask or didn't feel comfortable in an online forum, feel free to find me on LinkedIn and such. The details are there on the screen, and just drop me a message and I'll see what I can do to help.
Awesome. Thanks very much. Thanks, everyone.
Have a wonderful day.
You too.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. Thanks, EY.